And we're live with our 266th episode of Absolute AppSec. I'm Ken Johnson at CK Tricky on social media, joined by my co-host Seth Law at Seth Law on social media. Seth, say hi.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode. We're excited to be back as always. Have quite a bit to talk about from a news perspective, overall perspective. We know that there's a lot of world stuff going on right now, especially in the States. But yeah, we're going to talk about security stuff because that keeps us all sane. As far as upcoming items and housekeeping items, first up is the harnessing LLMs for software security or for application security. I can't remember which the name is there, Ken. But the virtual training that Ken and I will be doing on December 2nd and 3rd. You can register now. This is going to be a great course. If you've seen the recent articles from Ken on how dry run and the lessons learned that using LLMs for application security in the last year. This is where we're actually going to dig into the nitty gritty of how that is done, teach you how to use LLMs, what the different terms actually mean, how to implement RAG, how to use a vectorized database, all that kind of stuff to improve your own software security workflow. We added bits of this to the practical secure code review course, which is great and has been effective, but we've realized we just don't have the time in that course to really dive into LLMs and how they are actually used outside of a surface level. Hey, this is how we're using them for secure code review. So we're going to go deeper here. It's a 2-day course. Would love to have you. For those of you that have taken practical secure code review in the past and are looking to enhance that with LLMs, this is the course for you. This is where you're going to pick up those same bits that we've added to the secure code review course, and we'll be able to use them in your day-to-day. So join us
if you're
there.
a practitioner or if you're on the offensive side, you're going to get value out of this, and it's something that's going to help you. If you are wondering what you can do to help scale out your AppSec team internally, or if you're looking for ways to be more efficient at attacking applications, either way, definitely this is the course for that.
Yep. We're excited about it. We've been planning this one for a while, so would love to have your take and have your participation. Besides that, I was at SaintCon a couple weeks ago. I'm headed to DeepSec out in Vienna here in a few weeks, just the week before Thanksgiving. If you are going to be in the area, shout out to Juan. I don't think he's going to be at DeepSec, though. I will see some other people from the podcast, I'm sure, there, and would love to do dinner, whatever it is. But give me a shout out if you're going to be at DeepSec. You can also now get your Christmas Absolute AppSec merch. I think we've got a mug up so far, but there's a couple other things on the merch store. So merch.absoluteappsec.com. I'll post that one really quick as well before we get into articles. Last thing before articles, I do want to give a shout out to Dry Run today for sponsoring this episode. Dry Run Security delivers near instant security code reviews and feels as if you've just hired a team of the best AppSec code reviewers. It gathers security context in just seconds after a developer makes a change. From that gathered context, the company's proprietary code review process interrogates each code change based on behaviors, not just static patterns. Try it out for yourself, free at dryrun.security. So thanks to Dry Run. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about that here shortly. There is a webinar. Do you want to post that now before we dive into the first article?
Yeah, I'll post it now. So, I posted this article, I think it was a week or two ago. I can't remember. And it was about the last year of us using LLMs for application security at Dry Run. And anyways, I'm going to give a webinar or Dry Run where I kind of go a little bit more in depth on some of the topics that I discussed inside of that article. And it's been really interesting journey creating a product that acts like a security code reviewer. So going to share some of the good and definitely some of the things that weren't so good, and hopefully avoid people wasting time on the not so good things. But anyways, yeah, put the webinar link in there
Yeah.
and pop it in Slack as well.
Yep, go for it. I'm going to drop the other link that's actually to the blog post that you did that's going to be related to that. If anybody's interested in reading it, it was also in the newsletter. If you haven't signed up for the newsletter, you can get a summary of the weekly episodes, plus other links and items that we're watching on a daily, weekly basis. But the newsletter comes out about once a week right now. Sweet. Well, first things first. There has been a little bit of chatter in the Slack channel, specifically from Andrew Wilson. Andrew always likes to kind of stir the pot, but it's great because it really pushes us to think about different aspects of security and why things are the way they are. But he also posted on LinkedIn recently, and I'm just going to drop this up here, right? His link to his post related to views of penetration tests from within the industry, right? The fact that yeah, let me see. I'm wondering if we should just highlight this so we can actually like talk about these different points that he brings up.
Yeah, I'd share the article. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Let me
on
do
the
that.
screen.
Yep. We probably should have just brought him on to talk about it, but then, the way it happens with Andrew is we never quite get to what we want to talk about when he comes on because we talk about all the things, right? Anyway, okay. So Andrew states that he's been talking with, peers in multiple venues, different Slack channels and other places, but stumbled onto this apparently controversial opinion. So clients believe that pen tests should find everything. And I don't know, like I would have to agree with this conclusion just based on my own interactions and being a third party that comes in and does, penetration testing or application testing for various clients. There is this belief in the industry that if you do a pen test or if you pay for it, no matter how much you spend, no matter who the testers are, that you are going to uncover every single possible vulnerability in an application or in a code base. Yeah. What are your thoughts? I mean, I know you've hired penetration testers in the past. Is this like something similar that you're seeing on the product side that your customers think that a product is going to identify everything? Or are you having to re-educate people when it comes to like this idea that a single pass is good or a single penetration test or whatever firm is the best?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so first of all, I don't know about you, but
There's
I
a
find
lot.
every pen test. So, I
You
think
find
that's the end
everything.
of it. Just
Oh,
be awesome and amazing, and you'll never have to worry about it. No, obviously, I'm joking. So I've had this happen, and actually, one of the cases was I think with you actually, when we were at the consultancy that shall not be named.
okay.
You were the CISO, I was the CTO at that company. We were 30 odd some people. So you're doing a lot of pen tests. You're going to get some feedback. So a couple instances I can remember. One was, and we did a great job. I mean, we had arguably, we all know that everybody that knows internally why things went the way they were, no, it's not because of the people that we had working for us. It was an incredible group of folks. These were top tier talent consultants, and they did great work. And mostly, I would say almost all of our feedback, except for a couple of these cases, were like stellar. So we had one case where someone missed like an XSS and a header, but if it's in a header of a page, it's often like the entire website has thousands of XSS, but really it's one XSS. There was a question of whether or not somebody in our team missed it or whatever, but it was reported through a bug bounty, and then it became a very, very big deal because it was reported through a bug bounty. So I've absolutely had that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Two, We've done the bake off thing before. So while you and I were working together at that company, I can't
Yeah.
say the Silicon Valley company, but they are like they're probably one of the biggest social media, if not biggest social media companies you've ever heard of.
Heard of? Yes.
Um, yes, and their team decided it'd be good to give us like three different files that were chopped off snippets of code and asked to do a bake off to find all of the issues that exist in a very small bit of code. Maybe or maybe not PHP. Again, you can pretty much guess where this is going. Um, and so we did really well. I think there was one CVE potential. I forget what it was. It was actually something really mundane that we missed, I guess, and arguably wasn't even really an issue, but because somebody else reported that, in addition to everything else we reported, they got the contract. And all right, whatever. Well, again, it was a very silly, non-important thing. I argue that the strength of our write-ups and remediation advice and everything were pretty incredible and stellar. But hey, that's the way the cookie crumbles. I've had myself do a test and miss something and have a client come back and say, "You missed this IDOR. How could you miss this IDOR or whatever?" At that same company. So I've experienced it. On the other hand, as a defender, I hired a company um, at GitHub. I won't say that. Obviously, I'm not going to say the company, and they they properly screwed up, right? And I'll say why they properly screwed up, because I have experienced those things I just mentioned, and I know that, and I'll go into, and I know you will too, what it means to have a limited time boxed and scoped assessment when you're asked to review an entire code base. So in this case, for these vendors, I did not do that. I said, here's a very discrete, very small piece of functionality that's very new inside this application. It's not released GA yet. I'm going to give you, I think I gave them something like $92,000, I think, for about 2 weeks of work. And technically it's 4 weeks, but it's split between two people. So it's about 2 weeks. So those are the numbers, not giving anything away in terms of who I paid to do this. Well, that company did their assessment. During their assessment, that very same code, I had 3 critical, easy to find bug bounty submissions come in on it because we were running a private bug bounty at the same time. This was very important functionality, so we really wanted it vetted well. Again, not complicated things to find, 3 critical vulnerabilities. The vendor came back, even with that large amount of dollars involved for a very small amount of work, with nothing, just informational findings. I think one low maybe, and all of it was irrelevant and just trash. I couldn't believe it. I had never experienced a test that poor before, especially from a very well-known. You have to understand, once you're acquired by a company like Microsoft, your vendors have to go through a pretty onerous process.
Yeah.
So usually the only vendors that even get to do these assessments are big enterprise vendors, because they're the only ones that can afford to go through this, huge long vetting process. Okay, so those are my experiences on both sides. But I'll end with this. If you say, I have a entire application for you to review, or a website I'm going to give you, and I need you to do a pen test, and you have 1 week or you have 2 weeks, you are taking a risk-based approach. We talked about it in our course. It's a risk-based approach. You're going to try and identify the most critical aspects of how this application works, its underlying tech stack. You're going to prioritize your attack chain based off of that, the vulnerabilities you think might exist in it based off of that. You're going to go after those things, and you're going to do as much as you can. In those 2 weeks, you're not just testing. You're also writing. You're writing down all of your notes. You're writing your report. You're getting your report edited and getting feedback from other folks. They're giving you things to change. You have to go back and change those, get it reviewed. There's so much more that goes on beyond just testing in a 2 week or a 1 week period. We've all tried to eliminate a lot of the testing burden, and reduce that time through reporting platforms, or through, like, I know you've got your own special way of doing it, which is pretty awesome, of converting Markdown into reports and all that. You've got a really awesome process, but at the end of the day, it's not pure testing. So if you say to me, I expect you to find everything under the sun, I'll be like, yeah, no problem. Here's your 6-month contract. That's going to cost 6 figures to 7 figures
Yep.
for you to get this assessment done. So, anyways, that is my full on. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts here? What have you experienced? You're
Yes.
in the consulting world.
So, and this is near and dear to like my day to day, right? Like, because we consistently have, well, it's not consistently, but there are specific industries that assume that once they've done any sort of like a security assessment, whoa, oops, sorry. Apparently, I'm getting hit up by marketers right now on
Well, you
LinkedIn.
just got some Zachary, whoever you are, you just got some
Yeah,
free
you guys
promo.
got yeah, and it completely threw me off my like. Yeah, exactly.
Off your
Um,
rant.
exactly. So, no, okay. So it's near and dear to what I do on a daily basis. There are certain industries where we consistently run into this discussion. And it seems to be those that are more immature, right? Like, so if we come into a large client, like you used to work at GitHub, right? Like they have people on staff that understand how it actually flows, right? And they will be more understanding of this is the amount of time that it actually took. This is what we've actually found. This is, they're not expecting us to catch everything, and they expect the prioritized approach, right? Like we do our threat model, we know what we're good at, we know what we're looking for. We're going to turn around very good and succinct reports, recommendations, mitigations, work through with developers, all that sort of thing that goes into it. However, we have those immature industries where they assume that once I had somebody look once 2 years ago at our authentication process, that's always going to be secure, right? Or, hey, 6 months ago, we had somebody look at this Web3 smart contract. And so, like, there's never going to be any problems with it, right? That's a very immature, like, startup Web3 crypto um, aspect that I've run into. And it doesn't mean that those are the only industries, but I run into it more frequently with a new startup with a new Web3 project than I do with some of the traditional organizations that are out there that have really tried for years and years to understand security and reduce risk, reduce threat over time. And I've had, but on the flip side, I've had government companies come back a year later and say, "Hey, we had something happen, and you guys were the ones that actually tested this, 12 plus months ago. Why didn't you find it?" Right? And I'm always like, okay, I, like you may be right. You may be right that we as a company or one of our assessors didn't actually find something, that they were tired on the day, they missed something in the process, that you're going to go and flip vendors, throw away all of like the hard-earned work that and time that we've put into this because something has happened, just to affix blame to a specific breach, to a specific problem, to a specific, hey, there was a bug bounty issue that came in, so we don't want to pay you because the bug bounty guys found something that you didn't, right? And well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the knee-jerk reactions that go into it. I think it really comes down to a maturity of an organization as to whether or not they understand what they're trying to accomplish. And the maturity goes along the lines of both the organization that's paying for the test and the organization that's conducting the test. Right? The expectations that I set when I walk into an assessment are always like, hey, there's a clause in here. This was, the time that we assessed it. This is how much we did. This was the scope that we looked at. We have full logs of everything that, like, the endpoints that we were assessing, like all that sort of thing goes into it from a maturity perspective. When you're pulling somebody straight out of school that's working for one of the big accounting firms, they're probably not giving you that same level of detail. But they might be, but we know what juniors do as opposed to somebody that's been in the industry for a while because we've seen it over time. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
and actually, that's kind of the funny thing too, is like with those bigger companies, oftentimes that is the situation, right? Where it's like there's a tiered sort of um how do I say it? There's we'll probably put your junior or mids on this assessment, but we'll have somebody with more senior expertise provide oversight kind of thing and
Yeah.
review your report. And so it's funny, you pay more and you oftentimes get less, but that's just not. And to add to what you're saying, it's like if there was a mistake made, but overall you've been happy with the services that company's provided you, it's like if you change companies over that, understand that a lot of context and historical tribal knowledge about your application, about your development practices, about a lot of things that's specific to you are now gone. And it's a gamble on what you're going to get with the next company for sure. That's no question. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I get asked, who would you recommend? Like we want to have penetration. And also, by the way, okay, let me finish that thought and get to this thought. So I get asked a lot because people are very nervous about hiring, quote unquote penetration testing companies. But that's also another thing. And I think it's part of dovetails into what Jason mentioned here, where Jason Coleman had said, basically he works to train clients on their understand the mutual expectations on both sides and almost kind of train them on what is going to happen and what they should expect. And actually that goes to another point here, which is that I was trying to make it, which is do we even, this gets back to the nomenclature thing we always talk about. Do we even know as an industry what penetration testing really means, let alone, how do we explain that to a client and explain your expectations for what you're going to get out of a penetration test? I'd be interested to hear what your definition of a penetration test is, but I'll just tell you, for me, earlier on in my career, that just meant get as far as you can in breaking into this thing. It wasn't
Yeah.
find all the vulnerabilities. It's there were two different, in a professional consultancy, they didn't treat that penetration testing like that. They treated it like a vulnerability, what I would argue is a vulnerability assessment. But to me, that's what the origins of penetration test mean. How far can you get into this system and exploit it?
Well,
And
I
yeah.
mean, this is one of
So
the
what's yours,
education
I
things,
guess?
right? Yeah, I mean, Jason on YouTube, yeah, chat basically, is kind of is pointing to the same direction that I go. It helps to level set with a client on their expectation before the assessment begins, and the nomenclature thing it ties straight into this, right? They come to you and they ask for a penetration test. I'm constantly reframing that as, hey, we don't do penetration testing, we do application assessments, right? So we're assessing an application for security issues. I'm not doing a red team penetration test where I'm trying to break in as much as possible into an application. That will result from the assessment of the issues that I see with an application, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to penetrate into your environment as much as possible. And that's the only goal, right?
Right.
Yeah. And ooh, man, I just there's so much that goes into this, right? And I feel like we could probably pull Andrew in, him bringing this up during a asking the question during a conference to see how people responded to it. One of the things I don't know if I agree completely with is this idea of swapping vendors. I mean, from a consulting perspective who works with clients year over year, I do encourage clients to swap vendors and try out and get new sets of eyes onto code and onto applications. I don't think that's a bad thing. I also work with these clients before and after they do that sort of thing, just to enhance and improve the overall security of an application. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. But it goes back to that. Hey, are you going to switch streams, consistently, year after year after year, or how much do you want that tribal knowledge to be maintained year after year? Because there is testing fatigue, there is assessment fatigue that happens when you're on a small team. You've looked at the same code base year over year, and you kind of get to the end of your rope, and you have to find new approaches. And so that's not necessarily a bad thing. Swapping out a penetration testing firm, as long as you go into it with the knowledge that there's going to be differences, that the expectations, the scope is going to change, like the expertise are going to change, all that sort of thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just don't agree. I just don't agree that if your sole reason for trying a new firm is because of a mistake, then yeah, I would say I would not agree on that basis alone. I would say if you're thinking about it because you want to, like you said, maybe this company's been in there for a few years, you want to get some fresh eyes, maybe even just get a comparison of what another company sees. That's great. The one thing I don't understand too well, because because Andrew dropped this comment. He says, I agree with Seth. The real value is not just the results, but it's in the methods that lead to them. It's a key distinguishing feature between firms and needs to be more transparent to customers. I don't think I knee-jerk reaction. I don't think I agree with that. I think the only thing that matters is the results. Well, I mean, I should say, like, if you're doing something illegal to get those results, or something unethical, that's a little different. I'm not talking about that. I'm just saying, like, if one firm has a different methodology from another firm, but that's not, I don't think I would care as a client. I really, actually, I don't even, I'll say I wouldn't care as a client. I'd just care if you had whose results were better, realistically. So yeah,
Yeah, well, and
that's my
I mean,
take.
the purpose, yeah, the purpose behind the penetration testing is usually, hey, we want to secure our application, right? Now, like, there can be arguments from a compliance perspective. If cost is the only driver, you're going to be looking kind of outside the box for how can I get that done, within the frame of how much I actually have to spend. And resources can come from anywhere, right? From a bug bounty perspective, they can come from the traditional consulting firms. You can pay top dollar for the accounting firms to do things for you. But money doesn't necessarily equate to, like, your experience, right? Does not necessarily equate to good results. And I know that was one of the issues that we talked about with Andrew specifically in Slack, was there are technical expertise across the globe, and it's a matter of finding those expertise that you can work with and that can fit within your scope, within your time, within your budget, and get the results that you actually want. So yeah. I mean, and that goes back to the results, and the methodology of actually getting there is going to vary based on who you choose. But as long as you're comfortable working with them, I mean, great, go for it. And as long as you're getting the results that you expect. But I wouldn't, man,
It's a
and I
tough
know
one.
this, it's a tough one. And I don't want to sound like, hey, you should only use Redpoint to do this work, because there's a 500, there's thousands of firms that are out there that do some sort of penetration testing, and it's all different. And, it all can help actually secure your application. The problem that we run into is exactly, that statement at the beginning, is no pen test is going to find everything. If you're going into it with that mindset, I, I don't know what to tell you, because you're going to be disappointed. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's, when you clearly define, like, a vulnerability assessment versus a pen test, and you kind of give people because I've had this, another time I had this situation was with like I don't mean, we don't need to keep sharing examples, but so you know what, maybe I won't share that example, but I'll just say this, like, it is a weird thing that even when things are clearly defined, even when expectations are set, it's still jarring for somebody if somebody reported on something you didn't report on this time. Like, I've had that happen before with, like, a cookie that didn't have a flag. And it was actually when we worked together back in 2010. And I
Yeah.
didn't report a cookie that didn't have, like, one of the flags on it back then. I don't know, HTTP only or something like that. And it was like, there's no point. This cookie does nothing. It means nothing. But somebody else reported on it, and it was actually somebody else who reported on it in the same company. So we were just coming back and doing another 6 month or 1 year whatever
Whatever. Yeah.
retest. And yeah, they were upset about it. I'm like, are you upset? And they're like, well, this is a big deal from a compliance standpoint. I'm like, well, how is that? No, that's not true. And it just when we dug down into the real, it's just somebody's feelings on like, well, someone reported something that you didn't report. And it was like, yeah, they reported junk and they shouldn't have. And I'm sorry that they did. But we can't say that because they're our employee, but
Yeah.
anyways. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, it's a tough new. I mean, it's not something that we're going to solve today, but I like that he brought up the post because yeah, it does speak to the fact that expectations have to be set out there, and I think all of it. You could always say these things kind of bubble up to like we are still trying to formalize ourselves as an industry, and everybody knows that, and this is maybe just one more example of that. Of something
Well,
that's
and
not formalized.
I don't know. It kind of goes back to this focus idea, and I've been thinking about this a lot, right? Um, this this fact that like we laugh about Crocs and socks and the basics and like the approaches that we take. The fact that our focus as an industry is so much on vulnerability and exploit as opposed to the basics of actual security that I struggle quite a bit with. How do you reframe that conversation? How do you get an organization or like people that have grown up from like a pure vulnerability scanning, bug bounty life perspective? How do you get them to realize that true security is accomplished through the basics as opposed to I'm just going to go quash and play whack-a-mole with bug bounty exploits, bug bounty findings, vulnerabilities that have been identified by burp, the latest and greatest research that's out there. And it takes conversation and it takes maturity from, again, all sides that are talking about these issues. Um, yeah, and so like to you, Ken, I would ask, how do you approach that? Right? Like I know from a product perspective, you're selling a, a code reviewing process to companies that is going to secure things over time. But how do you get away from, hey, I'm identifying every single vulnerability in this to we are actually like approaching it from a more basic perspective?
Yeah, I mean, we do tell our clients like we're trying to find significant risk. I'm not here to
Mhm.
report on, yeah, like flags that aren't set on things or low hanging fruit. That honestly is like I take a very opinionated stance with this product. This like not to get into because it's I don't want to. I'm not promoting it. To be clear, this is not a promotion of my product. I want to I do want to give it like a this is important for understanding like how we mainly to answer your question we do it through discussing what are we actually doing here, and what we're actually doing here is we're trying to mimic a human being acting as a code reviewer that can take in a bunch of different data points, not just the vulnerabilities themselves, which really should be focused on really impactful vulnerabilities, right? Not the low hanging fruit which leads to like bug ticket backlog that everybody's dealing with. And there's a
Yeah.
reason, arguably, that these platforms have been built to manage bug bounty ticketing and issues like that. Or it leads to delays of shipping because people have to wait to get answers on questions for vulnerabilities that like nobody cares about. So focus on the vulnerabilities, sure, that matter, but also ensure that like there's other risk factors that you take into account, right? Who's doing this change? Are they familiar with this code base? There's like lots of little contextual clues. Are you touching something that's important in that application? One of the other things we look for is like, are you introducing or modifying existing authentication or authorization logic? Like all these different little risk markers, and then we aggregate that all together to say like, hey, there's either significant risk or not. And this is how you back down as a developer, kind of the easy button, a conversation, make it feel like somebody's reviewing your code. Now, why I say all that is not about the product, it's about the philosophy, which is if you are sitting there reviewing, if someone asks you, a client asks you to review pull requests, I'm sure you've had that asked for before. You're not looking for the little garbage stuff that, like, you can make a lot of comments and you could get a lot of busy work started, or you could look for the things that really matter. What's actually changing here? What's the context of this change against the application's existing functionality? Again, who, what, when, and where, and why questions that you need to ask about that PR. Um,
Yeah.
and once you've aggregated all that information, you have a pretty good understanding of how much risk is there and what kind of expectation, or what kind of recommendations rather, to give the person that's writing that code. And that's how, and all that gets much more complicated because it's almost trying to, as I'm writing this product, I'm having to reframe, like, yeah, we're not check marks, right? We're not going to flag on every little thing and then light you up with a bunch of tickets that you need to go resolve. That's not how we work. We're not also just looking at the code for regex patterns. That's pretty limiting. So that's just not what we're trying to accomplish. We have to educate people on that. Also, as you well know, we use a deterministic and probabilistic methods, which means, yes, there's
Yeah.
LLMs involved. So then we have to educate people on how that works. And so there's a lot of education, I guess, at the end of the day that we have to do. But then when people understand, oh, I get it now, then they start to see the power. And yeah, and that, so that is, I'll give that is a little bit of a producty pitch there. People do like what they're seeing, and it is, I would say, a breath of fresh air. But if we don't set all of that up, if we don't educate people on, hey, yeah, we're not going to find all this small little low hanging fruit, we don't care about it, and neither should you, then there's an expectation mismatch, and we end up with a situation where somebody's could potentially be fairly upset, if that's what they were expecting. I will say, I don't find anybody when I get on conversations, they're like, man, I really need more low hanging fruit inside my bug ticket
Yeah.
backlog. I'll say
Yeah.
that. Nobody's like coming to me and telling me that. What they are saying is that, they're overloaded with bug tickets. They're given, they sort of have these results that pop up, and then they don't, like, developers don't know whether they're real or not, or how to remediate them. you know so now further either delay or backlog of tickets. Like, those are the common things that I get. I don't get, like, I need more informational findings.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and Andrew just posted that in Slack as well. Somebody needs to educate the customer, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Um, and
Yeah, now I'm reading it.
we've been having talks about, like, oh, how does the OWASP top 10 also apply to that? Like, there's the pen test execution standard from years and years ago that, like, that's a whole nother bucket of discussions, or the OWASP software testing methodology, whatever it is called, like OSTTM. I can't even remember right now. But like, all of those are, kind of great resources to go about it, and they will identify some of that low hanging fruit. But again, without context, and this is what you're giving, right? Like, from a, the AI perspective, from what you're doing, like from a product perspective, is that context of what's going on to the in that pull request, in that application, gaining that context, and then prioritizing based on what that context is so valuable from an actual threat perspective, right? Yeah, and this actually leads to the other article that we wanted to talk about today.
Yeah.
And it does, because Gene Warlick has actually posted this new, and I'm going to drop it in here quick, this new idea, backing away a little bit from threat modeling to talk about attack modeling. Now, this is still a threat model. It's just a revised threat model that focuses on attacks and distinguishing what attacks are happening or you are concerned about from a threat perspective, as opposed to the attackers that are coming in. Like, if you look at Stride and some of the others, we're looking at spoofing, or what, I guess those are attacks too, but we focus on who the attackers are, and then try to identify the attacks that they could actually induce against an application, against a system, to determine whether or not the controls actually exist. But he's taking it a step further in that, and basically dropping the who are the attackers perspective, and just focusing in on, these are the various attacks that you should be concerned about within the context of this application, and are there controls in place to actually limit that? I know
You want to
you
share it
had
on
some.
screen?
Yep. Let me pull that up quick, and I will. Okay.
Yeah,
So here we
so
go.
and this is the article that I was still in the process of kind of getting up to speed, and we started talking about, and I started asking you like what, like, because okay, the first thing that jumped out at me was like hey, there's a diagram of a sequence of events, which is, the interactions that occur between the
Mhm.
systems. You can zoom in on it. I don't know, it might be a little weird to try and zoom in on that on like I don't know, it might be easy, might be hard. But either way, it's five different, well, four different systems, and then a user interacting with those four different systems.
Yeah,
And
it's a data flow diagram of
right,
of a, what is it, a forgot password system, right? Okay,
yeah,
that's great.
exactly. Yeah, and my first thought was, or first thought is, yeah, that's great, because there's a lot of areas where those trust boundaries break down and have issues, and they're usually more nuanced. They're not typically things that I would have like a burp, or any attack tool, a Kaido or whatever. Probably wouldn't start with those tools, right? So then, but then as I scroll down, the very first thing that came up was Burp Suite's attack library with stuff like PHP code injection and Perl code injection and SSI injection and all this stuff. And I need, we were talking pre-show, my immediate gut, I was just still reading the article, was like, no, I don't.
Yeah.
Why would I care about those attack library? Wait, no, I wouldn't care about that at all. I would only care about identifying the trust boundaries between those systems, and then like how that could break down. And however, then but I say that, I believe that. And as you go a little bit farther down, now we get to attack register. And that starts to look a little bit more like what I would expect, right? Where it's
Yep.
like, yeah, enumerating users on email address submissions. That's one, and a lot of these things are little discrete flaws that lead to like big flaws, where you've chained several things together to get to your whatever your ultimate goal is. In this case, breaking the forgot password functionality. So when I started to read the attack register part, capturing tokens and URLs, guessing the token, like having terrible entropy, all these different things that are listed, I'm like, okay, so that starts to feel like what I would care about. Would I give two craps about looking for, like, at this point anyways, not my initial assessment of attack, like, this is a mental model really that you're building, from an attack perspective, then yeah, I'm not going to care about XML external entity injection. And to be fair, it's just a picture of the library. He actually puts in there like you need to like use your judgment on what to include. But yeah, as soon as I got to attack register, that made more sense. So what was your thought? So anyways, that's as far as I got. What are your thoughts on this article? Do you like this approach? Are there,
I
is there some
I mean
preference for
I
this over like a defensive mindset?
yeah, because I we also talked a little bit about the rapid risk assessment idea as well from Mozilla
Yeah.
alongside this, right? From an attack model perspective or a threat modeling perspective, um, I go into these with how much time is it going to take to actually apply this and come out with something useful that developers can go and do. Right. And this is because most of the threat models I do are against code, against applications. We do network threat models as well. But a lot of times that's just not, doesn't pertain to my day to day, basically. But again, like I always, again, I go back to focus and context. And the fact that we're focused on SQL injection and cross-site scripting, we're pulling out the list of vulnerabilities and exploits as opposed to overarching security topics or security controls is what concerns me, right? From a stride perspective, from a traditional threat model perspective, I like that it's high level because it forces me to think outside the box about attackers and what they want to accomplish with a system, as opposed to here's a list of attacks that could actually happen. that may or may not be comprehensive. Like Burp Suite's a good place to start, and that could apply. But that's what I go back to is I don't know if I necessarily agree that we should just concentrate on attacks. If it's all the time that you have and it's giving you some good results, sure, go for it. But again, I go back to my Crocs and socks. Damn it. I get old and I get crotchety. And I'm like, we are too focused on exploits and vulnerabilities. And when we get too focused, we lose track of the other stuff outside of this. Because you know what I don't see in there, Ken? You know what I don't see in this list?
What's that?
I don't see logging. Damn it. I don't see auditing.
Nothing about auditing.
No,
Not
I
a single
don't.
thing.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
they
I do.
don't, I mean, they
Okay.
can,
Yeah. Okay. Do not include password or token in logs. But
yeah, well,
I'm
that's,
not seeing monitoring that's built into that. I'm not seeing like how are we actually detecting that attack is going on, right? Like, so again, like the focus is on the authentication attacks that are happening here, maybe some authorization attacks, but we're dropping auditing outside of don't log, passwords into the logs. Damn it, right? Like again, like I feel like we get so hyper focused as an industry and as security professionals on our favorite vulnerabilities and exploits that we forget about the wider picture and the context of where an application lives.
it's true. And I'll give the devil's advocate to this, which is that, um, what I will say is some of the really interesting forgot password issues I've discovered that allowed me to take over other accounts, that came from more of a offensive view of the application, a more holistic sort of the totality of all moving parts. And I think that, although I can't say that I like individually thought, okay, let me create an attack model in my head and let's see what is some of the register items like, can I exploit an open redirect? Maybe in that moment I saw something that looked like it potentially had open an area for open redirect, and maybe I would start plugging away there. Well, I mean, for sure, if I thought there was an issue there, I would start delving in. But I can't honestly say it was more of just going and using the application, passively sort of observing it, and then saying, what if? And I started
Yeah.
coming up with a bunch of what if scenarios and brainstorming, like, oh, what if I try this? And then that what if turns into, oh, that actually worked, but like this other thing stopped me. Okay, so then what if I could find that thing that's stopping me, like, would work somewhere else? And, maybe it's okay, actually, I don't need that to work because if I modify the way I'm attacking here, I can use this other thing that I found. And that's really just thinking through, like, as a human being, how I've actually found these things before. It's not through any sort of defensive or attack based, official, sort of written down thing. It's more of just, yeah, a lot of what ifs and, huh, kind of. So, anyways,
Well, and
I
that's
don't know.
and,
That
and
does not help this conversation whatsoever.
no,
I don't
it
even know why I
does.
say
It
it, but
does.
that
It
is,
does. Because I want to tie it together because basically what you're doing is you're building a threat model based on the context of the application, and that's what you're attacking. You're not building an attack model for the application and then looking to see whether or not that actually exists or the controls are there to prevent it. But you're building a threat model like almost one step above the attack model that is being approached here. And to be to be fair to the author here, right? Like this is a usable approach and could
yeah.
probably be helpful in a lot of situations, especially when you are scoped down to a specific task within an application or feature within an application. This could be a very useful approach to take. Wider, like as I zoom out, and to your point, the threat model, the model of the application that you find to gain context helps you prioritize and helps you identify what attacks could be possible. And I don't know if you're necessarily going to get there from a strict, I'm looking at attacks against a specific data flow diagram um, activity, where you could get there from a threat model perspective or a threat activity instead.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to every, that's really what you just said kind of is true about, and in so many areas is true of the industry, right? Like if you were to make a comment on the industry, one of our things we just talked about was like, hey, formalizing things a bit. And that's true, and codifying practices and codifying nomenclatures and all that's really important. And at the end of the day, though, there is always this like tension where it's like 95, I don't know, I'm making up stats. We'll say 95% of security can be codified, can be, found via tools, can, and through automation, can be improved in some way through those means, right? But there is still always that like little rub where it's that small percentage that does require, like, I would argue, human creativity, that almost, so like a lot of it's codified science, most of it, and then some of it's 100% art, and just the human being coming up with something super creative and interesting.
Well,
And
yeah,
that chasm that exists between those two different worlds that are very different but are in the same, like, the person, like, you can hire an army to find that 95%. You can't hire an army to find that 5%, we'll say. And or build the tool that can find that, at least as of today, right? We're getting closer to it, I'd argue,
yeah,
but it's still a very human thing, I guess, and it's very much art in some
yeah.
ways.
It is. And this always goes back to that, the idea of the risk prioritization, threat modeling that we do within the code review process or any assessment, where I want different eyes. I want to describe to someone what I learned about an application, and I want them to tell me what the threats they think are. Because I'm as guilty as anyone for, hey, these are the vulnerabilities or these are the flaws that I've seen in previous applications. My experience leads me to actually go down those paths, and it's been effective for me as a consultant over the years. But it also means that I put some blinders on when I'm looking at an application, and I need another perspective. I need someone else to talk about what they actually are concerned about, or what the concerns they see with an application are. It's the reason why we talk about scoping so much when we deal with clients. What is it that keeps you up at night? What are the avenues that you think an attacker would use to go after your application? Or why would they be doing that? The answers to those questions are invaluable when I am trying to, number one, break the application, but number two, understand a client's thinking as to why an assessment needs to be performed for this specific application. Yeah. And
Yeah,
I
I
know
mean,
we're going to get,
and
yeah,
well, I would just add to what you're saying, which is like, and when you, especially when you're dealing with software engineers, they also know the dark edges and the dark corners, and where maybe the company or the team or they weren't, as knowledgeable, or didn't maybe have as much time, or just for whatever reason that part of the code is not as robust, we'll say, as it
yeah.
could be. Um,
Mhm.
so it's always interesting to ask those questions. And we also talk about it when we talk about it in the course with brainstorming with other people internal on your team. Whether that's internal at your company, that as a defender, or whether or not that's consultant, it's like, it's always good to hear other people's perspectives of, okay, here's all this information, what attacks would, or what risks, or what defense, or what do you think about this application, the whatever thing it is, the system, whatever thing it is that you're testing. It's always good to get
Yeah.
diversity of thought. That's the
Yeah.
that's the important part.
Well, and I mean, honestly, and this goes back to the initial discussion that we were having as well, right? The more people that you involve looking for threats in an application, the more you're actually going to be able to identify, the more you're going to be able to actually secure. And so, um, assuming that one organization, that one activity can find all of the exploits, all of the threats, all of the issues with any system is immature. And we need to educate people that it's not going to happen, right? There's still going to be problems that exist after someone spent 2 weeks looking at your code base.
Yeah,
There just
there will
is,
be.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, you wouldn't expect a developer to be able to go in and fix all of the issues in a code base in a very limited amount of time, and that you would never have to work on it again. Right. Uh,
No,
yeah. So,
wouldn't.
so why
Yeah.
are we expecting, yeah, why are we expecting any security professional, any bug bounty program to identify all of the issues in that same sort of like limited scope? It doesn't make any sense. So, anyways,
Yes,
I feel like
I
I've just
agree.
been ranting, Ken. Like we've just
That's what we do, man. That's what we're good at. That's what we're good at. Ranting now. I don't know if we were even good at it, but we do it. So, and we've been doing it for 266 episodes. So nothing's gonna stop us, I think, at this point from continuing to do that. It's no, it's a tough, it is a weird world too, because like I don't know, man. It's just things are changing so rapidly, which is kind of like, we didn't really get to the article, but like now the EU has this new
yeah,
liability policy they're putting out to recognize that things are changing so rapidly in so many areas. That we don't have to go in depth on it. We can post an article about it, but the basic premise is, new digital economy, AI driving like autonomous vehicles and smart devices. Trying to with sustainability and what they call a circular, what is it, circular economy or something like that.
uh-huh.
Which is all about sustainability of products, trying to address how things are changing. And so it's funny because, like, as an industry, we're fairly new. I think 2001 was when OWASP was actually founded. So that's only 23 years ago. And years fly by pretty quickly. So 23 years ago, we kind of officially became a thing, maybe we can say, maybe. And in the midst of evolution, right? Things have evolved rapidly around us. I mean, that's the whole thing of our keynote that we gave at AppSec and DevOps days in Melbourne, Australia. That was
Yep.
the whole point. Is we're like, we're trying to grow up, but also everything is changing so rapidly that we're also just trying to keep up. When you put these two things together, it leaves us as an industry that's like, we want to grow up, but also it's really, really hard. And we're also just trying to keep our heads above water with chasing what engineers are doing next. It's like I look at Guy from Sneak, who went off to build a company centered around, I don't know if it's like securing code that's written by AI, or if it's um, just a company built to build code. Or I think I need to look. I think it's around securing um, software written by AI. But I guess my point is like he's already thinking, about like how AI systems will be used to be our developers and trying to get ahead of that. And it's like, man, that's like most of us are just trying to like cover people, submitting secrets in source code or, trivial day-to-day things. And it's like, I guess what I'm saying is like that's a huge difference between what most of us are dealing with day to day versus what some of us are dealing with trying to get ahead of things. And it's just such a weird, I don't know. I just think a lot about like where are we today? Where are we as an
Yeah.
industry? And anyways, probably lost people at this point. So I'm gonna stop rambling about pontificating about where we're at.
No, I mean it all kind of comes back to that, right? Like you look at at other industries that like we consider to be mature and how long it took them to actually develop some standards, right? Like, construction's kind of an easy one, and there's still flaws in construction and they improve over time, but it's decades, like, building codes and other things, and like the way that they like approach it is very much a piece by piece and like change by change that overall affects the industry. But they have time to actually assess those different codes, the different materials, everything that's going into building something to make those changes, right? It I'm with you because we're moving so fast that it's very difficult for us to actually have that base to improve because the base is constantly changing. And so we got to be comfortable with change, constant change, in order to actually secure a system. Yeah.
Yep,
Anyway,
absolutely. By the way,
yeah.
it looks
What's up?
like Tesla, the guy's company, is reimagining software development for the AI era and
Uh-huh.
helping shape a new paradigm called AI native development. I'm just reading off their site, so it doesn't look like it necessarily has anything to do with security, but I'm gonna put the link in just because.
It's
Anyways,
interesting. Yeah.
my
Yep.
whole point is just things are changing so rapidly. It's always hard for us to like, while we're also trying to figure out the best way, because like nobody. Let's just say that like DAST and SAST and IAST and all this. None of this stuff is like set in stone, right? None of it. It's what we've come to get used to, which is also like to your question about what I deal with on a daily basis. That's pretty much what I deal with. Is like can't tell you the conversations that are I'm like, okay, so do you like how things are going today? No. Do you think your tooling's accurate? No. Does it work well with your processes? No.
No.
Do you want to try something different? I don't know. It
Yeah.
sounds suspicious. Like, what the fuck? Like, anyways, but so, anyways, just all I'm trying to say is none of us have really said we love how these things work. We have great this or that, whether that's processes or tooling or whatever. We haven't even formalized, like I said, naming conventions. And so while all that's happening, we're just constantly scrambling to keep up with new technology, new development processes, new ways of thinking about how software gets shipped. And it's like we should give ourselves a little grace as an industry. That's how I'll close it out
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
it's
we
a lot.
definitely should, right? And on the flip, I'd also say like use what works for you that actually proves your process. Right? Like just because it doesn't work for somebody else doesn't mean that it won't work for you. And also recognize that just because it works for you at a specific organization doesn't mean it's going to work for anybody else. Right? Yeah. You know, be curious and figure out like what somebody's asking before you propose a solution. Cool. Okay. Well, I'm trying to remember. Are we on next week? We might have somebody. I don't even. I'm
Well,
sure
I'm
we'll be
around.
back next week. Yeah.
I know you got a busy
All right.
month, but I'll be available next week for sure. So, and I don't think
Oh,
we have a guest scheduled for next week, as far as I can see on the calendar, but I could be wrong.
yeah. We had to actually bump it, so we'll need to talk through. We'll be off schedule next week because
Okay,
I do have a conflict. I've got a training conflict that day.
right.
So, um,
Okay.
but we'll watch
Well,
here. We will
maybe
post
that's a
about
good
it.
after dark. Maybe that's a good after dark thing. We could maybe just do it next
Yeah.
week in lieu of a podcast episode because we've had. I know you got asked. I've been asked to do more after dark things where we. So we were thinking of
Walkthroughs.
showing.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, we're thinking about some walkthroughs of just whether that's. I
Yeah,
think one of the ones we threw. Yeah,
it would be fun to walk through, use the LLM, the generative AI stuff against an open source project, like we've done in the past. Hopefully, we can get some developers mad at us again because that's always fun. But watch for that. We'll schedule it. We'll advertise it a little bit on LinkedIn, on social media, when we're going to actually record. And yeah, should be a couple-hour thing.
yep.
Sweet. All right. Well, thanks, Ken. Thanks everybody for participating. Thanks, Andrew, for the impetus to really dig in. And yeah, we will see everyone next week.
Thank you.
Ciao.